network. And of course, I don't know if it's the weather or is it just issues with network problems. And that, of course, is the reason why we're running over with time. But thank you indeed for bearing with us. All of you, our valued viewers and listeners, and very especially you, Dr. Vusi Sibanda. You are the president of the African Diaspora Global Network. Thank you indeed for your patience. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the invite, and good morning to the listeners.
Thank you indeed. The all-important question, of course, is, has Zimbabwe just abandoned its 6 citizens in South Africa? And we are talking approximately 3 million Zimbabweans that are now residing in South Africa. And what is this all about? The Zimbabwe government is saying that it won't fund the medical bills of its citizens in South Africa. That is 3 million. And we do know that not all 3 million will necessarily be sick at the same time, but over time, this is the numbers we're looking at. And this comes about because of groups like Operation Dudula and other protesters are said to have blocked foreign nationals from using public clinics and hospitals. They are accusing the foreigners of placing extra strain on limited health services at the expense of South Africans. How do you feel about the statement and the fact that the Zimbabwean government refuses to even consider paying the medical bills of Zimbabweans living in South Africa?
Well, look, this is not, it doesn't come as a surprise because the Zimbabwean government has failed to provide healthcare in Zimbabwe. I mean, we're very aware. We have seen, mothers that are expecting babies, delivering, sleeping on the floor where there are no beds. And we have seen how appalling, the healthcare facilities are without doctors and without access to medication. When people go to public hospitals, they just given a prescription. They resort to buying medication at pharmacies because, government facilities or public, health institutions do not have any, painkiller, not just ordinary medication. So it does not come as a surprise if the government of Zimbabwe says it is not able to pay or it will not pay. It must just say that it is unable, it cannot afford, because the country has been looted to nothing. I mean, it has become an affair of just a few individuals that own that country and that can access anything that they want, but everybody else cannot access it. So the public funds are continuously looted. You will remember recently in Zimbabwe, there was the issue of first interchange that was built, which apparently was built, using money that was loaned from an individual. One of the ZANU-PF, hopefuls called Tagwire also and his companies had to loan that government the money, and the government will have to pay back to an individual. Now you can imagine if you had a situation where the government is not loaning people, but people are loaning the government because they have looted that government. So there is no government in Zimbabwe. There is nobody who's capable of providing any public services. Public services have been leased out to private individuals that have looted, the country with the assistance of the politicians that are currently sitting.
Very, very sadly, it seems as if the citizens are now caught in this stalemate situation between Zimbabwe and South Africa. On the one hand, one can also get a sense and sympathize with the South African public, because it does seem as if there's a huge strain on our state health services as well. And I think the most natural response, whether right or wrong, depending how you view it, the response from South African citizens is that foreigners have come into the country and they taking away basic services that are meant for us. Their government does not want to assist them, and what is meant for we are paying taxes, and what is meant for our health and well-being is being compromised because of foreigners. So it's a terrible catch-22 situation, and to the point where even Zimbabwe's Justice Minister Ziambi has told the Zimbabwean Parliament that it is not their government's responsibility to help citizens in South Africa, the citizens should fund themselves. And we do know that a lot of the Zimbabwean citizens that are living in South Africa are faced with a whole host of other challenges: housing, education, joblessness, etc., etc., etc. So then, where to from here? Because on the one hand, we have organizations like Dudula, who refuses to allow citizens to Zimbabwean citizens to access healthcare. On the other hand, your government is saying it's not their responsibility. So, whose responsibility is it, and how do we move forward in a humanitarian way to assist everybody concerned?
Well, look, I think, unfortunately, we know that insofar as the Zimbabwean government is concerned, that is a failed state, a failed government. It's one of the failed states that we have in Africa, considering that it does not have its own currency, and a greater part of its population has left that country to other countries like, South Africa, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, the United States and Australia and so forth. So we know, therefore, that that is a failed state. It's a very classic example of a failed state that is non-existent. Now, it becomes just a little bit more unfortunate, when we also have got people like Titula that misinformed and ill-informed, and, that, want to proceed, on the basis that the bulk of the people that are in South Africa are not paying taxes because unfortunately, they do not understand tax regimes. They do not understand that anybody, even unemployed people, pensioners have been double, taxed on the basis that, they got, taxed in their income now, on their pensions and all that. So once people understand tax regimes, and that everybody that consumes in this country, everybody that travels on the road, is obviously, paying taxes, just, the base, entry part of it. But again, the issue that we've got people that Dudula is fighting against, some of who are regularly in the country, are employed or run businesses, and fighting with these people that are contributing immensely, who would obviously, if they went back to Zim, they probably might not be able to do anything because of the fact that there is no economy there. So that is just like you say, the catch-22 or the double jeopardy that these migrant people are faced with. But the only way, I think, as it stands right now, is basically to look at the relations between, the intergovernmental relationships, that exist between Zimbabwe and South Africa, is such that there must be a dialogue, between the two governments. And that dialogue must not be, on stroking each other's egos, but it must be on dealing with fundamental issues, that, involve the governance in that country, the politics in that country. Because you must remember that South Africa is part of SADC, it's been in the UN, Security Council and the AU. And obviously it has got an important role to play in ensuring that, the politics of that country is functional, because the rest of the bulk of the elections that have been stolen in that country, South Africa has been complicit. They've been invited. They've said the elections are free and fair, even when other, bodies like, SADC the last time were saying, no, the elections were free and fair. So the South African government is complicit in the butchering of the human rights of, the Zimbabwean people that have ended up, fleeing that particular country. But again, that should not be a problem. It becomes unfair, especially where we've got undocumented people that then, obviously cannot be planned for by the South African government, which makes it very difficult, because there's no country on earth that, would be comfortable with undocumented people, because it cannot plan on how to provide services. It will appear that there is lack of service delivery result of the people that have not been put in the planning because they are not documented anyway.
Thank you indeed, Abdullah Chabal, for your comments. I've seen your comments on Facebook, very valid indeed. Back to you then, Dr. Vusi Sibanda. This is a very delicate situation, and something needs to be done, and it needs to be done soon. If not, there is a great risk of xenophobic attacks starting to happen within these communities. What do you believe? If we're going to wait for the Zimbabwean and South African government to meet and try and sort out this matter, it ain't going to happen anytime soon. What do you believe civil society bodies and organizations like yourself, people like yourself, can do to start engaging with parties concerned for people, groups like Dudula to understand the exact nature around these matters, and for these services to be opened up for all peoples, whether you document it or not, because it's really about humanitarianism, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. Well, look, I think the biggest challenge that we have is that the lack of functional government, in Africa, and is a very, important issue that needs to be looked at in terms of mass, action and movements, within particularly the region, like maybe what we saw at some stage with the Arab Springs and all that. So what we're looking at is we are looking at civic society organizations, and we know that governments in Southern Africa, for example, they've been actually, on the offensive, butchering, civic society organizations that they are elements of, that are funded by, Western countries, that are regime change, agendas and all that. And as and as you already know, that we've got problems like that, what we have in the DRC, where we ended up having, Rwanda, Uganda, they are all, coming onto the table. And, because the US has come in, but, Uganda is also coming because they've always, been assisting in looting that country. So the challenges that we're having are such that until these governments that are already, in power, particularly that liberation movement that came in and did not really care about, and any understanding of what, human rights, law is all about, and that have not sought to advance themselves in understanding what is proper servant, leadership and government, so that they can lead their people and not, to loot and worry about themselves and create, empire, their own, family empires of some sort, or dynasties. As long as we have got that kind of a problem, then we're not going to see any change in Africa. So the responsibility lies with individuals, with ordinary people, civic society organizations, grouping themselves, organizing themselves in order to ensure that, there is a voice, because we know that the governments that we have, as has been said before, that the AU is a trade union of dictators and all that. We know that these organizations, regional bodies, they are only a means to enforce, the brutality that is meted on the people by these governments. They are pro-government and they are not pro-people. So people need obviously to, stand and begin to deal with these particular issues and make sure that the governments are confronted. That is the basis of, constitutionalism or the social compact. When people don't want, the government, or the government is not serving their interests, they've got to eject. Unfortunately, John Locke, the fathers of constitutionalism, had to use the word like, look, you've got to eject the government, even if it means violence. So, of course, we know that in the modern, era of constitutionalism, it is frowned upon, to talk in those particular terms. But the only remedy that African people have at this particular stage to make sure that they've got governments that they want is to want to stop being bribed by these governments, with these false, ugly tenders that they get, as I mentioned, the issue of Takwire in Zimbabwe, and all these tenderpreneurship that are coming in South Africa as well, so that people, can become, loyal to these criminals. We need to see a change, and that change needs to come from the people, from the CSOs that already are organized, so that they can continue to organize. But unfortunately, a lot of them, rely on these governments for their funding, these CSOs as well. So they cannot really speak and work for the people. So it's a double jeopardy. It's a real mess.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Vusi Sibanda. Thank you indeed for your input on this very, very serious matter playing out here in South Africa. And of course, both governments not wanting to take accountability simply because they're all too busy lining their own pockets. They've been overtaken by greed. And I think, as you rightly say, it's time for the people to rise against all of this corruption in not only South Africa, but throughout Africa. Thank you indeed. Go well and God bless.
Thank you very much and good morning.
It is exactly 9:01. A reminder that the second hour of News and Views is brought to you by Africa Muslims Agency. And don't forget that we will be taking a listen to our Fired Up series with Hafiz Imran Chunara. He's a personal excellence mentor and CEO of Africa Muslims Agency. we'll take a listen to this clip at about 10 to 10 this morning. So do stay listening for the rest of the show. 2 after 9 o'clock exactly. It's time for an ad break, and then we'll continue the interviews right here on News and Views.